Welcome to the Moksha Canada Foundation's Diversity Festival. We are here today for a panel discussion. This is our third panel discussion, and I should mention it's actually the Diversity Festival's fourth year. It's our second year bringing it online, and we're just very grateful to all of our panelists today to be a part of this discussion. We're talking actually about youth mental health and sort of the status of where we're at right now in our communities with all of the things coming at us in our society. We just really wanted to shine light on it and give an opportunity for some of our youth to speak and to talk to some other guest experts as well. So thank you for joining us. A shout out to Moksha Canada Foundation for allowing this platform to happen. Thank you to Sunil Channon, the founder. We thank you. We could not be here without you. So thank you very, very much for that. And shining light on you is very important also. Thank you to our panelists. We have another person who may be joining us from Vancouver, and that would be Dr. Li, Dr. Guofang Li. But in the meantime, we're going to get started with our panelists as we have a lot to talk about. Shout out to Moksha Canada Foundation. Please follow us on social media. These conversations happen because of you and because of all of the discussions and ideas in our communities. So like us on social media, follow us on YouTube, and subscribe. All right, my friends, here we go. So we have a young person, Jessenia Rahman, who is here, but she's on her way home from holidays, and we're just honored to have her here today. And she's a youth guest who's going to be contributing from her perspective. And then we're going to jump into a conversation to include Dr. Ghosh, who will be joining us from Alberta. So here I go. So Jessenia, welcome. I know you're not able to put your screen on at the moment, but that's kind of cool for our guests as well too, to have the audio options. So just reminding our viewers that we're connecting with people, we're engaging, and this is even more so of an opportunity to loop Jessenia in, even though she's on her way back from holidays. So Jessenia, would you mind, I'm just going to read your bio a little bit, very, very briefly, so we can get started in the conversation. And just
thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you for being here. We're very, very grateful. So Jessenia is a third year Queen's University student, and she is in a variety of associations and clubs, including those that support inclusivity, diversity, and equity. And we're here today with Jessenia to hear her voice on talking about youth mental health. So Jessenia, we issued you a question, and I wondered if you kind of wanted to just share that with our listeners and viewers today, and how you want to tackle that.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, Lynn, thank you so much for, having me involved in this. Moksha is obviously a foundation that's really close to my heart. I've been involved in it for 2 years now, and having the opportunity to meet so many of you and really do these kind of things that are, for the greater good of not just our community, but for the entire Canada. It's something that I really appreciate. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And yes, to get right into the question, I believe the question was about my perspective on youth mental health and what are some of the challenges that, especially in today's day and age, that youth are facing regarding mental health. So to just get into that, I think obviously one of the most obvious things that we can think of right now is obviously the pandemic and how that's completely changed the lives of families across the country, and not only leaving adults feeling stressed and anxious and struggling to cope, but also so many individuals and youth especially who, may not have those skills yet, or those coping strategies that adults have. So they are the most vulnerable at this time, and even though we are starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, I think there's definitely a lot of effects that the last year and a half, 2 years has, caused on us that'll continue on for a while. So, but one of the prime things that I can think of right off the bat is how youth have been spending a lot more time on social media. And while social media does have its benefits, and especially during this pandemic, we've seen how we do have the ability to connect and stay in touch with our family and friends, even though we haven't been able to see them. And it is a valuable support network, of course, for myself and so many others. There are a lot of harms and negative effects that especially teens have faced. So whether it's the distracting, the disruptions on their sleep, which I'm sure Dr. Ghosh can talk about in more detail, and exposing them to so much more things such as bullying, rumors, unrealistic views of themselves, and peer pressure. These are all different things that youth face when they put themselves online. And even if they're not directly online, even just scrolling through a feed on Instagram or Twitter, it's very easy to tell. So there are a variety of risks and I even conducted my own research that link excessive social media use to lack of sleep and the inability to have a proper restful night, which then affects the next day, the productivity of their day, whether they're going to school or that people social media and a high risk for mental health concerns. And there was a study conducted in 2019. So this is obviously pre-pandemic of more than 12,000 preteens, so 13-year-old to 16-year-olds. And the more social media they used, it really had a negative effect on their mental health and well-being. And that again ties into depression and anxiety. Teens have greater social media use, especially during yeah.
Just cutting out a wee bit, Jessenia there. Yeah.
Sorry, am I
No,
on?
no, you're doing amazing, and it just cut out just now. So if you wanted to just pick up there, yeah.
Yeah. So the audio is okay right now.
Right now is perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Yeah. So I was just talking about the links between the high level of social media and depression and anxiety, and how it's linked with the worse sleep quality and higher levels of depression and anxiety, as a lot of teens and youth take their gratification and instant validation from likes and comments and views. And I think Instagram, they recently implemented this new thing, which was that they covered the amount of likes that a person has. So the general public isn't able to see how many likes per photo. So there are small little things that are being done to kind of reduce these risks and stuff, but I still think that with this new term, the influencer, how so many people, that's what they aspire to be when they grow up. And these days, from just sitting behind your laptop, anyone can become an influencer on makeup, on sports, on any really interest, which obviously is incredible. And the reach that you can have being 16 or 17-year-olds from your bedroom is outstanding. But there's also been so many links and people I've spoken with who do engage in these things, but then at the same time, a few years down the line, they do have to suffer the repercussions of this. And we've seen these with so many teen stars in the media, including Justin Bieber, how he rose to fame so fast and in a short period of time, and then that kind of all came crashing down when he had a whole bunch of mental health concerns and overdose and drug addictions. So yeah, I think that's what that's kind of my take on the link between mental health and youth and some of the challenges that they face.
That's amazing. Super well articulated there, Jessenia. Thank you so much for just launching the conversation. And often pain is not often recognizable. We can't always see it. It can be underlying and it's never visible. So this would be maybe a good time, if you don't mind, for Dr. Ghosh to maybe jump in to the conversation. If you don't mind, Dr. Ghosh, I'm just going to read a bit of your bio, please, and thank you, just for our listeners and viewers today. Jessenia, that's amazing, and feel free to be a part of that conversation, but we'll loop in Dr. Ghosh as well, if you don't mind.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'd like to say Dr. Ghosh, Monty is an addiction specialist and a researcher from the University of Alberta. Monty Ghosh is an internist addiction specialist with the clinical professor at the University of Calgary and University of Alberta. He works with multiple community-based not-for-profit organizations to provide support for marginalized populations and is heavily involved with provincial policy building in Alberta, clinical health systems and research, and implementation of science provincially and nationally. Take it away, Dr. Ghosh. Thank you for joining the conversation.
No, and thanks for having me here. And I completely agree with all the statements that were made earlier. And I'm not a mental health expert. I'm an addiction expert. So that's sort of my focus, as well as internal medicine. And there definitely is a correlation between mental health and substance use. Often mental health can be a trigger for substance use. And sometimes substance use can be a way to cope with mental health. And we do see a lot of that. We do see a lot of self-medication because of mental health concerns. We see a lot of self-medication because of trauma. And when that sort of management of trauma and mental health concerns gets sort of out of control, that's when we really do see addiction. And so, I mean, one of the keys here is sort of cut it at its roots, right? To take it at its stem. And so, having mental health supports and being aware of mental health concerns and developing mental health resiliency is by far the best way to sort of, especially in youth, to sort of manage future concerns that might arise because of it. So I can't stress it enough. And that example of Justin Bieber, for example, is very classic. We do see individuals who have you know, for one reason or the other, because of anxiety, because of pressure, because of stress, engage in substance use to relax, to cope. And that definitely does affect their overall wellness. And we do know that substance use can cause problems for wellness, whether it's mental wellness, physical wellness, emotional wellness. Can cause disruption with the family. It can cause disruption with social supports and social networks and structures. And so, yeah, it's very important to sort of, again, take care of this at its base. Oh, I feel like there's more questions that you have coming for me, Lynn.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. I wondered if it had cut out there, but I think that was the end of the sentence. Definitely the correlation, I guess, and that's sort of why we brought you into the conversation today as we navigate our way through what mental health is and other things that have sort of affected in our youth communities. And coming from the education background as well too, definitely see the change and the landscape is changing, the pressure is changing, the conversation is changing, or lack of conversation. But you know, hopefully we're raising awareness for and giving people a platform to be able to speak about it more often. You know, because everyone is affected by it in our communities, right? Yeah. So, Jessenia, if you don't mind, I'll just get you to jump in again, just in terms of, you know, maybe your last sort of comment or question for Jessenia from anyone that may want to ask her as a youth, or Dr. Ghosh at this point, before we move on to any other speakers. I am just trying to get some chat up here. I can't see any. I've got someone raising their hand. That's
Yeah,
Hunyah.
I have a question. Like from your perspective as a third year student, what would you say are the mental health pressure that you feel as a student? Like since you're in third year, I know there's been COVID, and then you had to work from home, you had to adjust to a lot of new things, and you're going back into university for another year. How has that been?
Yeah, so I think, you know, obviously for any university or high school student, there's been that drastic change in your education being online, in person to online all of a sudden, and it was completely unexpected. And for me personally, it was my first year. You know, you're still adjusting and adapting to this new routine, this new lifestyle. You have a lot more freedoms, but at the same time, a lot more expectations, and you're kind of, you know, coming into your adult life. So for me, I think as, you know, a third year, having that all of a sudden shut down of complete no social interactions, whether it's in class, being able to talk to your professor afterwards or asking for help. Of course, there, you know, so many new business ideas and so many new things have come out of the pandemic, whether it's online tutoring and having, like how we're having today, you know, this wonderful session and the diversity festival being put on online instead of in person. But at the same time, there is something to be said about having that in-person connection, whether it's with your classmates, you know, grabbing lunch with them afterwards, debriefing whatever the class was about. I was living in residence at that time, and then having to come home and then make that other adjustment to you know, working from home and my bedroom basically this past year. So, you know, obviously in the beginning, whenever there's something new, a lot of my peers, especially, we were all feeling anxiety to some extent. And I guess it depends on the individual as well, how they're able to cope with the mental stress and the mental health obstacles that they're facing. But I think, you know, more or less everyone did feel like that one way or another. And I know some peers to a more larger extreme where they did have to receive some help emotionally online or from a psychologist or someone who they can speak to, because this was such a new thing and something that we haven't navigated before, obviously. So I think that's the perspective, from a university student, and how, there were so many things that we were looking forward to in person, being involved in different societies and clubs and having that experience. But then also the other, the education aspect at the same time. So it was definitely those two things combined. And I know, Hunyah, for you also have, a lot to speak to on how the last year and a half has been for yourself, and the mental health changes that have occurred. So I would love to hear it from you as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a great answer. I agree with the points. Being a third year student and with all this going on, it impacts mental health a lot. So I agree with you.
Definitely. No, thank you for asking the question.
It's amazing. And maybe tying a question with Dr. Ghosh at this time. And Dr. Ghosh, I have actually a question just in terms of isolation if someone is using, and that as coming through sort of the pandemic and even being even more isolated. Could you help us to understand what that's like in terms of being a problem for someone being in isolation and not having access to services or their needs being addressed if they are presently using? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, as you kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of isolation being a cause of substance use, or a precipitating cause or worsening cause of substance use. We know that access to services is key, and then definitely the pandemic has affected that access. We see that in data throughout the country, that there's a correlation between lack of access to resources, as well as increased substance use and increased overdoses, especially with opioids. Now, the key is to provide more access and encourage people to access it, right? It's not just having the resources available. It's about ensuring that people do access those resources and educating people about the resources. And so there needs to be a multi-pronged approach in dealing with this. So whether it's marketing, reaching out and doing outreach to communities, bringing them to sites physically if need be to get supports, doing telehealth outreach to individuals, but increasing supports for them where they're at and meeting them where they're at is key. In terms of dealing with social isolation in general, the best thing I can say is that, you have to kind of balance that with the pandemic, of course. But trying to get more engaged with community is definitely important. We know from previous studies that social connection is a key way to address substance use and mental health concerns. And being supportive as a community for individuals who have substances and not stigmatizing, not being derogatory to the population is definitely key. And so I think what we need more in our society is supportive communities for those who use substances, those who have mental health concerns. And I think that will further drive positivity and lessen mental illness or mental health concerns and substance use concerns. So it's definitely important that we do that and educate people on that and decrease the stigma, which is what you guys are doing here right now with your sessions.
Wow, amazing, Dr. Ghosh. Any questions for Dr. Ghosh and correlation? Hunyah, I see you got something going there. You're brewing with the question.
Thank you. I was gonna say, I have a question in that case, that what are ways how we could support each other in the community towards mental health stigma? Like, what are your recommendations?
I think there's, again, a multi-pronged approach. One is education. So we need to educate the population, and that we need to inform individuals that mental health is not a sign of weakness. Like, having mental health concerns is not a sign of weakness. And asking for help is actually a sign of strength. And that messaging, I think, is very important. I think we need to also know that it's very prevalent. Mental health issues affects about 20% of us in our lifetime, even more. Actually, sorry, I think the numbers are as high as 50% of us in our lifetime. And 20% of us at any given point in time. So I think it's important to sort of spread that message that the problem is widespread and it waxes and wanes, and that's normal and that's fine. And that's just who we are as humans. And there's nothing to be ashamed about, much like getting a scratch or having, or falling down and bruising yourself while biking is not a big deal in our society. But there is this fear and the stigma of asking for help, and we need to remove that too. I think also sort of connecting with mental health supports and meeting other people with mental health concerns and being very visible with mental health is also important. That sort of helps drive away stigma, because, you know, if people only knew how many people around them had mental health issues, people who they admire, they trust, they look up to, I think there would be less stigma for it. And they would feel more encouraged to actually ask for help as well if they were having mental health issues. So again, a multi-pronged approach is definitely important. I was going to say, I have a question for Jessenia. And in terms of being a student as well, this is for Hunyah as well. Being a student and being an ethnic minority, what do you think culturally and being an ethnic minority, how does that impact your mental health and in your way, the way that you fit into society here in Canada? I'm curious to know more about that.
In my opinion, that would be there's high expectations from parents, and then there's also peer pressure as well. That's one of them, and one of them could be is like that it's unemployment rate, because when you graduate, from my experience, I had a tough time finding employment after I graduated from college. It was a long story how I continued with my volunteer work, and I applied to at least a billion places, and in any kind of retail, whatever kind of job it was, I was ready. And on that had a huge impact on my mental health. I felt like I wasn't progressing. So from my opinion, that was my take on this, that it's unemployment rate, and there's a lot of peer pressure from South Asian perspective as well, from parents, and then from the community. There's like all these kind of things in there.
And Jessenia,
Thanks, Hunyah. Yeah, I definitely agree with what you were saying. I think just to expand on that a little bit, I would say that, as you mentioned, Dr. Ghosh, that three-pronged approach of education that's the first step, right? And I think coming from, you know, an ethnically diverse background where that conversation isn't always prevalent in our society, that's something that, you know, I felt that I've struggled with, and definitely my peers as well who are from the same background. A lot of the times your mental health isn't necessarily regarded as an issue or a problem as much as, you know, some physical problem that you may be having. So sometimes, you know, especially with the older generation who hasn't heard as much about this or are not aware of all of the different mental struggles that we go through as youth in today's society, I think that definitely does have an impact on them being able to understand our perspective and the things that we're going through. And then also for myself, you know, going to a university that's predominantly not diverse at all. You know, Queen's University doesn't have a super rich diversity in terms of their student population or even the teachers as well. I think that was also an adjustment of its own, and still being able to realize that your values and your culture is still as important, and understanding that you still have to kind of make your way as who you are, even in a program or in a place where, you know, you may not feel as accepted all the time. So for me, those are the two, I guess, main things that I wanted to touch upon. And I think definitely being from an ethnically diverse background, it does have a different set of struggles and a different set of challenges for youth. But I think as we're having this conversation today, and the more people that we're able to, you know, project this to and bring it to through Moksha, that would be great, because at the end of the day, education is the first step to improvement. And yeah, I think that's definitely my take on it, and how, you know, being an ethnically diverse youth that's my perspective.
Sure. And I was gonna say, like, I think I'm South Asian as well, obviously, and I was born and raised here in Canada. And I think one of the things that I felt was that it was great to have cultural factors that were building resiliency for mental health. So, like, you know, very strong family structure, very supportive friends and family friends. I mean, the community is very, very supportive in many respects. Yeah. But there's a lot of still misunderstanding about mental health, and there's this sort of I guess it's not as talked about in our communities. And so it's kind of interesting because you see this in other cultures, and I would say in some of my colleagues, they might not have as strong of a family structure in place and a community structure in place, but the mental health awareness and the acceptability of mental health concerns is much higher than the South Asian population. So it's very, very interesting how that balances out. And I'm also curious about Angelique's perspectives as well as another ethnic minority or visible minority, and if culturally how that has impacted you, and how that impacts your community's mental health.
Hi. Yes, so it's a great question, and it's great listening to the conversations, and definitely there's some differences in regards to how the approach is, which is one of the things that I really try to advocate when I'm speaking in regards to like the workshops in the workplace, because it's very diverse workspaces now, and the conversation in regards to them understanding how to really support their youth and their children always comes up in those conversations. And what I usually try to say is in regards to make the self-care practice very holistic and is very culturally appropriate and very culturally comprehensive. And so their talk therapy is not for everyone. Some cultures going and just speaking to a stranger and your traditional therapy, psychotherapy, is not for everyone. So definitely I see it, and they see that they're very open to approaching their mental health in different ways, right? So whether it's in regards to movement, right? In regards to the movement piece. So this is where the whole piece about the yoga piece is. Spiritually, is another component, right? Within different cultures, and I'm not talking about a religion, I'm talking about in regards to a spiritual concept and how that impacts mental health, right? Within our foods are different. So in regards to the education and the acceptance of how mental health is impacted in our food. So I see it in our conversations on a very consistent basis. And I think it's a great thing, right? And the more that we have these type of platforms that we can talk about that, the more that we kind of embrace the idea that mental health comes in many different forms. And in order for it to be sustained, we have to approach it and meet them where they're at. Like you had said earlier, meet them where they're at and being aware of that. So yeah, definitely I see it all the time. In the adults, in the youth, and in the children across the lifespan.
That's amazing. Thank you for looping that question in, Dr. Ghosh. Angelique, would this be an opportune time then, thank you for the segue, to introduce you and maybe have you join the conversation further? Thank you all just for,
Sure.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. We're very appreciative. To share a bit of bio about Angelique Benois, is a self-care and wellness expert, as you may hear in her conversation, and her passion for us. Angelique Benois has over 18 years nursing experience, both in Canada and internationally. She holds a degree in psychology, a Master of Science in Nursing, and completed her nurse practitioner degree, specializing in mental health. Angelique is certified by the Mental Health Commission of Canada to provide education on mental health first aid. She also has completed her mental health at work leadership certificate from Queen's University and Morneau-Chapelle. Angelique combines her extensive mental health clinical background with her expertise in holistic and sustainable self-care. Welcome, Angelique,
Thank you
to the conversation.
You're
Take us
very
there.
welcome.
I wondered, Angelique.
Okay, so I believe, because the question, let me just pull it up here.
Thanks. Appreciate
You
that.
had asked, how do we embrace the need for mental health supports for our youth? And so I reflected on that. I thought it was a great question, and I wrote some stuff down. So there's like 5 main points that I wanted to kind of touch on. And the first one is in regards to doing things to cultivate our mindset in a very holistic and a sustainable way. So when I say in regards to a holistic is like kind of what I was just talking about. So not mainstream, not only in regards to focusing on mental health as it is in regards to therapy, but also looking at it in regards to like cognitively knowing what our distortions are, because we all have those kind of limited beliefs. Physically, that whole physical and mental piece, as well as in regards to our nutrition, in regards to someone had said in regards to our sleep, right? Spiritually, emotionally, everything across it, the whole person. And when I talk about the sustainable way in regards to our mindset, is that not necessarily waiting for us to experience a difficult challenge in our life. Understanding that our mental health is something that we cultivate on a day-to-day It's a lifestyle, right? So that we can also prevent things from getting to a place where we feel, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. I'm kind of this area of I'm losing hope, or that, I can't get out of this, right? So that's definitely one of the things that I wanted to say. The second is the third actually in regards to is the non-judgmental piece in regards to the way that we listen to our youth, right? I definitely think that's a way that we embrace the need and understanding that the contributing factors to mental health nowadays for the youth population specifically has changed. And someone had said it very nicely in regards to when they talked about the social media, right? And the impact that that has in regards to our sleep, as well as, like they mentioned, in regards to the way that we communicate. Now youth communicate very differently in regards to how they used to before, right? And so really helping them to still practice the way of communicating, setting their boundaries, speaking their voice and their truth, and not necessarily being influenced by the crowd all the time, because maybe that's not the best way to serve them, is a really an important way that we can strengthen youth mental health. And they need to have practical strategies and tools to do that. Right. And so that can be in any type of form in regards to approaches. So I mentioned the yoga piece and the energy piece. The therapy piece is another piece in regards to the talking piece, talking about in regards to educating them in regards to the foods that they can take. Right. And I've noticed from working directly with youth, as well as supporting the caregivers in youth, is that a lot of times you take for granted that they really don't understand the links. Right. So in regards to embracing that need, it's to really educate, have conversations, and the last is being aware of your own biases. So the only way that we can have these non-judgmental conversations is being aware that we all have biases based on our experiences. And the more that we can speak honestly, know in regards to our limitations and when we need to ask for help, the more the better it's going to be for not only ourselves, but everybody that we share time and space with. Right. And so this is a thing I try to drive home on all of the workplace webinars, because I'm like, you have to lead by example. You have to lead. So that's my request and my invitation to any of the adults listening is to, how are you illustrating the importance of self-care in a sustainable and holistic way to the young people in your lives? And if you can answer that honestly, and if there's a gap in that, is about figuring out a way that you can kind of do that, because they're watching, right? Self-care is learned. It's not something that you're just born with. So they're watching how the adults in the world manage challenges in the life, right? How do they cope, right? And so they need that those tangible skills and strategies, and to know that it's okay. It's okay to approach self-care, to need self-care. It might be difficult, but having that encouragement. So from a professional, from a personal, I'm a mother. I'm always trying to do that self-care advocacy for my young daughter. That is how I truly believe those are the main ways how I feel that we can embrace the understanding that youth mental health is important and it's needed.
Oh, that's amazing.
I hope I answered your question.
Oh, absolutely, you did, for sure. And I think it'll morph into as we go. I think there's a few questions from our Facebook viewers and followers. So I'm just going to, actually, one person made a comment here: isolation is a big cause of mental pain. And I just wanted to reference that. And that's what you're saying, sort of getting in there at a grassroots level as well, but starting it very early on and as a lifestyle, not when you run into a situation. It's preventative. So maybe we can just take it. Yeah, for sure. So
yeah, and I think that also, that it also reduces the stigma attached to it. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Which was huge. I think you're talking about the stigma piece, because then they're like, oh, okay, I'm not alone. It's normal, and it's okay.
And then again, we're having this platform today, as you had said, and I think Jessenia was mentioning as well, and just breaking down that stigma that, and especially cross-culturally as well. Very, very important. And I think that is what we're doing. And all the power to us as communities to be able to do that and shine light on the needs, right? I'm looking away for a moment just to kind of address some questions. It could be for yourself or anyone that feel free to jump in. Pardon me while I pull those up. Maybe you can chat amongst yourselves for a moment. I seem to have lost the, oh, there they are. Okay, thank you. So we have mental health first aid training and cultural sensitivity training to the frontline workers, educators, and first aid responders must be mandatory. Does anybody want to comment on that?
I apologize for being late. I miscalculated time.
Oh, no worries. Thank you for jumping in. We're just raising a conversation. Yeah, your timing is actually perfect. So we're just going to answer some questions from our audience. And we have Angelique who's speaking, but if anybody wants to jump in from any other panelists or guests, mental health, do you think it should be mandatory for our first aid responders?
So that's interesting. There's a part of me that wants to say yes, and there's a part of me that I know in regards to adult learning and having something mandatory, right, can maybe rub people the wrong way. Strongly encouraged and educated in regards to the benefits of it is my preferred approach in regards to it. I mean, but mind you, like I said, I'm torn about it because I've been in situations and in organizations where it was mandatory. And even though initially some employees, and they're very vocal in regards to it, it's like, we're mandated to come and do this. By the ending of the experience, they're very grateful that they went through the experience because they didn't realize how much they didn't know and how much they can implement new strategies for themselves. And even if it's not for themselves, but somebody in their lives, because when you look at the stats in regards to it, chances are if they're not experiencing a mental health concern across the spectrum, there's somebody in their lives, whether in their family or in their workspace, that when they're getting educated, they can relate, it resonates, and they're like, oh, okay, that is why this person presented this way. Oh, and this is how I can do it, right? So for that reason, I guess I would lean towards that, yeah, but I do honestly have a little hesitation in regards to forcing anybody to particularly do something, right? I'd be more curious to know, honestly, as to the resistance. And that's the approach I would go with. What is the resistance to going for that kind of training?
Oh, that's interesting.
What is it?
Yeah. I came up in conversation with our first panel discussion, actually, with one of our panelists from the York region. And actually, that's the cultural sensitivity training that they're doing themselves. And they were just wondering, should it be mandated or not? And it is working in their region, fortunately. So it's working in their favor. But yeah, hopefully there's no resistance. That's a good one. Does anybody else want to jump into that? And
I have a comment to add in there. I think that for mental health first aid is really important. I've taken the training myself, and I feel like that if you're going to work in a different number of workplaces, you should be able to know how to handle if your coworker, your employee, your client is dealing with a mental health issue, just so they know to be the first. Because it can be, yes, like healthcare workers, they are first responders that way, but if we can do that as ourselves, no matter which position you're at, that would be really helpful, because it eliminates the stigma, and we're more open to mental health cases, and to knowing it early before it gets onto a really extreme stage, in my opinion.
I'm actually going to agree with Hunyah on this as well. I think mental health first aid is key for everyone. And in my mind, it's because it creates a better workplace environment. It creates a better supportive community, that piece of understanding, it creates better emotional empathy. And I think it helps broaden emotional intelligence for the population. So I think it's extremely important to have, and I think as a leader, you'd want to have this in your organization. We all know how psychological safety can be detrimental in some situations for individuals, and you want to create a culture of psychological safety, and mental health first aid can definitely impact that. And I mean, I also agree with Angelique too. You don't want to force anything on anyone. But if just thinking about the benefits versus the costs, I think the benefits far outweigh the risks.
Amazing.
Yeah, I guess it just comes down to the semantics of it and the approach. So,
yeah, indeed. And
I guess it's also about personality. So like I said, in my mind, I know that it's important. I really do believe for mental health, like that's my passion. So I see how that's like the core to a lot of other things. And like you said, relationships, healthy workspace, and culture within the workspace. But it's just mandate. I guess it's the word that doesn't, you know what I mean?
That was the details, right? As always.
Yeah, I know.
You hope it evolves on its own, right? Yeah, to not be mandated, right? It should be a natural thing. And hopefully we can get that education, as we're talking about, in resources out there to say, you know what, let's do that. I know Guofang Li is joining us as well, and I'll give her a moment to kind of just get organized. And we have two other speakers as well, but I'd like to keep the questions going from our audience members and answer a couple more here. Pardon me if I'm looking away. This is from Mitakana. Self-care gives a sense of security for and to keep mentally and emotionally healthy forever, all times, security for all times. I would totally agree with that. So self-care is very, very important, a sense of security and a rooting and grounding, perhaps. Does anybody want to speak to that? Yeah, so I think we're kind of speaking about it with Angelique as well, that self-care is very, very important. And we've been speaking about it, that it starts from the very young in terms of education and resources. And then we have Anu saying, thanks for sharing that insight, Angelique. We're getting hellos from people. So yeah, we're enjoying our conversation here today, taking it in a few different directions.
Maybe because I'm late, so I'll jump in. I really believe self-care is very, very important. I think this is for immigrant families, especially mothers, who always sacrifice themselves for their children. I think for, you know, and this is not just for the kids, but also for parents who always neglect themselves. I think they also need to learn how to take care of themselves and be a little bit of selfless in this kind of challenging situations. I think by taking care of their own health and mental health, then they can better support their kids. But a lot of times parents who are so devoted to their children always forget about their own self-care.
And that speaks to the pressure that we were talking about with Jessenia and Hunyah, just for the young people, the pressure that's placed on the youth and the children, and the parents are trying to keep that up. This is a great time for you to actually jump in, Dr. Li, and I wondered if I could just quickly read your bio and engage our viewers even further into this conversation with you. Dr. Guofang Li is a professor and Tier 1 Canada Research Chair and Transitional Global Perspectives of Language and Literacy Education of Children and Youth in the Department of Language and Literacy Education at the University of British Columbia. Welcome to the conversation today, and we're very, very happy to have you once again as a panelist.
Thank you very much for having me, and I apologize again for being late. I somehow in my mind it's 1 o'clock.
Oh, no,
then I realized, oh my God, it's 12.
Monty's in Alberta, so we were he was corresponding about that too, right? So yeah. It's all good. We're so happy to have you. And perhaps you'd like to engage us in the conversation about maybe perhaps the question that was issued, or just what you're talking about now, and how important it is to be mindful as a family unit of all of these, the mental health care that goes into play.
Yeah, I want to emphasize like two parts. One is the language barrier. The other, you probably have discussed, is the cultural barriers, because mental health is really cultural. It's what is conceived as mental health issues in the West may not be considered as mental health issues to some other cultures. Another thing is the family's willingness to seek help. A lot of times that new immigrant families, for example, they come in, they're not sure where, like, who to ask for, right? So they're also very reluctant, because I think mental health in some cultures are private matters, and it might make the family lose face, right? So they want to keep it to themselves. And so I know, coming from Asian background, for example, there are research showing that Asians are 3 times less likely to seek mental health help when they need it. However, the number of mental health challenges or issues confronted by Asians are at the top, you know. So you have this very cultural practice that you want to keep it to yourself. I think a lot of the families think they can manage themselves and forget that there are agencies or services, supports out there that can help. So I think that one of the key issues is to how to break down or communicate that cultural differences and help families sort of understand it's okay to seek help when needed and where to go with removing the language barriers.
Absolutely. We talked about this before, teaching newcomers as well in immigration services. It's so important to have sort of that inclusive package, if you will, inclusive information that covers that, and cross-cultural and multilingual resources that need to be available, and hitting on a grassroots level the communities, making that maybe not necessarily literature available, but the conversation available, in ways, shapes, or forms, which you have spoken about before. Someone here is commenting mental health needs to be in the school curriculum. And I believe that's somewhat what you're speaking to here. Could you expand upon that for us, Dr. Li?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that it's already social, like in school curriculum, we call it social emotional learning. I think many schools here in BC already incorporate that in the curriculum, especially since last year with the pandemic. And I think that's very important and need to be more, I think it's new. So, and the school has been pushing for it. So I think I think we are really on a good start. And I think the services, the social emotional learning, again, is more based on Western ideals or ideas, and that needs to be more culturally relevant to newcomers. And I think that's if we go move forward, that's the part the services need to continue.
For me, that takes away the isolation component, and it is a very lonely place, isolation, as people are commenting here today, and it almost seems like an island that you're on, and linking the island to the rest of the community. And how do we do that intergenerationally and cross-culturally? I wondered if we have anybody who wants to engage in the conversation here with Dr. Li. Any questions that you want to jump in with? What we're talking about today is mental health, and it's Moksha Canada Foundation Diversity Festival. It is the 4th annual. It is the 2nd online one. Hope to see you live in person some other time. And we're so happy to have you join us today, Dr. Li from Vancouver, and also from Alberta, Dr. Ghosh, and our friends around Ontario as well. Thank you for tuning in today. We're all about connecting, and I wondered if you have any questions for Dr. Li from our viewers or our other panelists sitting in on the conversation today.
Well, I don't have a question to say, but I would like to just echo and say that I completely agree in regards to the cultural piece, the cultural approach when it comes to self-care, because as there is a lot of stigma with mental health problems, mental health concerns, there is also stigma around self-care, right? And the way that it should be done, and on a cultural level, right? So a lot of times, as much as it's growing now and people are becoming more open to understanding, exploring different ways to doing it, but I mean, in regards to meditations and what exactly is, how's that different from mindfulness, and in all of the energy, approaches as well. Like when you think about self-care that way, and you're open to it, you see huge differences, not only in the person that is applying and practicing it, it ripples out to the people that they're around, right? So often that's the main thing that the questions that I get in regards to, so that the teaching of the mental health is great, and to know the signs and the symptoms and all that, it's wonderful. And then they're like, okay, now I have all this information, it was great, now what do I do with it? Like, how do I, right? And so giving them those practical skills about this is how you can apply it, and this is how you can help your youth, right, is really important. And also Dr. Li was talking about, family, and how, as parents, we tend to, our self-care is put on a back burner, if on a burner at all, right? And it's always like children care. And so learning how collective self-care is really important. It's a big part of sustainability of self-care, and having those conversations within family units and within communities that make it just a normal way within our workplaces, that we can all support one another in our self-care journey, is really, really important.
Amazing. Yeah, for sure. Dr. Li?
Yeah, I'm thinking with with what's happening in Afghanistan and incoming some of Afghanistan immigrants and refugees. I think other war-torn countries. I think we need to also think about mental health support from a trauma-informed practice, where we need to understand that that's different from the kind of everyday mental health issue we're talking about. And there's a lot of trauma that comes even for those lucky ones who have, made it to the Kabul airport, right, who made it through, but they still have a lot of trauma that came with it. So I think that just the ordinary everyday mental health issues, what we are more familiar is not enough. We need to think about how to enact trauma-based practice.
No, Dr. Li,
And I don't want to.
Go ahead, Angelique. Yeah.
I don't want to hog, but I just wanted to jump on that because in regards to the trauma piece too, I totally agree. And it's interesting. It's even just the traumas of day to day, right? So of course there's the day-to-day trauma, and trauma also comes in a spectrum. And for people to be educated about how trauma lives in the body and how we can do things for our self-care to kind of address that, that's an excellent point that you said, right? And taking that holistic approach, because this trauma, especially in regards to the financial health and how that impacts mental health, and the traumas that come with those who and different economic statuses and stuff like that too, the trauma that's involved, right? Both in the school and at home and in workspaces. So definitely trauma informed is key for self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also going to say the same thing goes for substance use disorders. It has to be trauma informed, it has to be trauma focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also culturally sensitive as well. We know that the psychospiritual piece for substance use management is very important. It's one of our key pillars for managing substance use disorder. And as such, I think it's a very important point that Dr. Li has brought forward, is that we have to make it very culture sensitive. And we see this in some of our key communities. The populations that I work quite a bit with is Indigenous populations. And there's a lack of connectivity with their culture for obvious reasons, right? We've read this in the newspaper, of course, as well, with the residential schools. And so having culturally appropriate, culturally focused supports and treatment is key. And it's not just with the Indigenous population as well, or the South Asian population in Alberta, for instance, as well. They interpret things differently. There's a cultural context and cultural lens that we have to have, because their approach might be slightly different, although following the same principles as sort of our standard Western fare, right? So it's definitely important to have those contexts evaluated and provided for those individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a
Absolutely.
comment to that.
Go ahead, actually. Absolutely agree with all of the above. I'm going to give Hunyah a moment to speak there. And I just
Yes,
wanted to
speaking about trauma and talking about cross culture and this factor, what I know is because I've actually had this, I've experienced this myself. I had an accident after I finished college, and it took me 1 year to recover. And the trauma and in there, like when you experience it yourself, it's like you don't know what to do. At the same time, the cultural differences is when you go into a clinic, it's different, and it depends on the doctor. Because what I've seen is like if it exceeds the way how doctors approach it. From my own experience, if it's like whether it's a South Asian or non-South Asian, their perspectives are different. But it's it's like the support that you get from the community and how you deal with it. Because with me, it took me 1 year to recover to walk again, and it was just like it was just like learning again how to walk, and it's a whole long story itself. Like I was like stressed out a lot that I felt like I couldn't walk, but luckily I did. But what I know is like that depending on culture and depending on that, people, like some people would say that, oh, it just takes only 2-3 months. Other people would actually give an approach that no, that you won't be able to do anything now. So it's like it's all about perception in a way too, with the cross culture differences and trauma. From my own experience, I just thought I'd add that.
Absolutely. Would this be a good time to have you jump into the conversation, and I can introduce you to our listeners today? This is amazing where the conversation is going, and so appreciate it. take a moment to introduce Hunyah Irfan, who's speaking right now and has engaged in the conversation today. And I'm so happy that you're here today. She is a blogger, a YouTuber for Hunyah Travels, an author of Hunyah Travels Mental Health Guidebook. Aside from being a blogger, YouTuber, and author, Hunyah has mental health first aid certification, as well as facilitated discussion on self-care and mental health. She's got a variety of other hats that she wears, but I'm going to spend the time allowing her to jump into the conversation here and let her shine light on what she would like to today.
We discussed earlier about social media impact on mental health. As a person who's who does videos and have like constant engagement and all these things going on with social media as a person myself, although I'm not like an influencer status yet, but yes, like blogging, YouTubing, that's what I do, is what I've noticed in there is that it's about how you perceive people's comments, people's views, because I've noticed that that there's gonna be like random people who will like send you at least 1 billion messages that, oh, that sponsor us, be our ambassador, but you have to pick and choose. And one thing you have to know is that if you know that your work is your work, that's all what matters. As a person who's on the media myself, like that's something I've noticed. And also it's like if you want to do something for self-care, in my perspective, as due to what I do, is that you should always give some time to yourself to take off from the screen and then go on from the screen after 2-3 hours. It's something what I do daily. So as from a blogger and YouTuber perspective, like yes, there's a lot you deal with mental health, but it's the way how you perceive a lot of people's comments. And the thing is, like take it positively, like take it as criticism, like constructive criticism. At the same time, make sure you keep excelling, because that's what I'm doing.
Moving forward. Hunyah, did you want to address the question that we had shared with you as well? And then we'll have everyone jump into the conversation on our.
Yes, yeah, that was one of my perspectives in there. The other perspective was that as a South Asian, like there's a lot of stigma around mental health, and that is like that sometimes it's not talked about much. And often as a person who graduated from Humber College, and then I mentioned earlier I had my accident, like mental health was something not talked about a lot, because the way how people would see it is like, oh no, you'll get a job in 2 or 3 months. No, it was not the case. Like it's about community at the same time. So it's like, how well does your community support you? Like how well does your support group support you, right? So that's where that matters. And you should always be able to talk to someone about mental health, because due to what I know for myself, like I would go to my relatives and speak about my mental health issues, and sometimes speak about than anywhere else. But if I really have to go and speak to somewhere where I feel like that, talking to someone at home, like to get a third person opinion, that I would go to a psychologist, psychiatrist to get a more informative opinion, in my opinion. That's helps.
And as far as being a young person and sort of navigating the way as you've come through COVID and such, and what are some of the key issues that you've seen being most prevalent, and the positive things moving forward, and how we are addressing some of these issues and learning about them actually as we go?
Actually, in COVID, I feel like I progressed a lot, because I earlier, like before COVID, like yes, I would go out, but the difficulty I had was when I had applied to some jobs and I would go for some interviews. It would take me, like some jobs would be in downtown, and if you're like in Brampton, downtown takes about 2 buses and then 2 subways, as compared to Mississauga, it takes about 1 bus and 2 subways. So I actually felt like the distance was a problem. And whereas in COVID, I felt like I've taken so many trainings, I had so many different experiences as an individual, as well as a blogger and YouTuber, that I didn't have before. And that is a great asset to my skill set, and I see it as a light and tunnel to excel myself.
Wow.
So that's all I say.
Yeah, and you know, when you speak, I see the light when you're speaking. I love that, and I just find that so encouraging. And very uplifting. Thank you for and you're encouraging for all the young people out there listening today, right? if you want to try something, dabble in something new. And if someone is out there and they're just, they're maybe not as geared towards some of the things that you do, and they're feeling a little isolated, and, what would you recommend to them on a, maybe, maybe it's a taboo, they're not able to speak about it. Where would they go? Where could you recommend as a young person?
I would say if you're not able to speak about it, first see who's at your house and then try speaking about it. And if not, then the one way to cope is, yes, attend different Zoom sessions and go to like mental health, like focus group, health, like informative groups. That's one of them. Another thing would be self-care is I make sure you give some time to relax, because mostly like sometimes the reason why we get stressed, in my opinion, because whenever I'm stressed, I need a break from everything. So I just go to sleep sometimes. So definitely self-care is one of them. Takes do something for yourself, like maybe go out for a walk, have like try a new recipe, or like read a book or something like that. I recommend in case like you need something to feel less lonely and to exclude the isolation, in my opinion.
Yes, please, Dr. Li, go for it.
I'm not a blogger. I'm not an influencer. So apparently, I'm very inexperienced in this aspect. But I do read research on people use social media and totally isolated, but rely on social media as main connector. So I think that there's ups and downs about it. So if some people, I know there's a very well-known blogger or influencer just committed suicide, right? So because of this isolation, despite all the likes that he got, I forgot the person's name, very young, 21 years old.
I would say, in my opinion, it's a support group. Second of all, like, yes, there's one thing that where you have likes, but at the same time, likes shouldn't matter to you so much. Like, even for me, like some of the posts I get like sometimes 3 likes and I still keep it up there. Like, I don't care about what anyone thinks of me. Like, that's what I do. Like, it's about like how you take, like, you shouldn't take social media like too personally, and at the same time, you should keep it in a way like, personally for me, I have one personal account and I have a page. So that's what I do. So on my page, whatever I keep in it, that's for everyone to see. On my personal account, that's just for like my close relatives or like the people I know. That's for that. So there should be a differentiation in there. And I don't think so. Like, there should be, like, if you're not a blogger, if not a YouTuber, that's fine. Like, in my opinion, social media sometimes is one of the most resourceful places, because some of the experiences I had during COVID, I found them through social media. There's so many workshops that organizations and different festivals and all these things go around that we don't know until we actually see it on social media. And sometimes they're accessible only through social media, like their Google Forms or like their registration. So that's the way how I've been taking it.
So you should teach yourself to sort of filter through the negative in there. But yeah, so ahead, Dr. Li.
That's my first point. But second point is that because of the social media and the kind of technology sort of immersion that we are forced into, I think it's really important to keep a routine and incorporate exercise routine. So you have, even if you're isolated at home, there are many things you can do. You can join fitness groups for free, and exercise is one of the best ways to combat negative energy, depression, or even any mental health issues. So by having a routine, have a personal health, like exercise goal, you can feel more connected with a positive community.
I agree. I've actually taken online dance classes myself during COVID, and it was really beneficial, because I felt like that, I was actually moving around, and then rather than just be sitting on the computer all day. 'Cause at the same time, that affects you. But it's like, yes, if you can take like a little like some fitness classes online, that makes a big impact on your mental health and how you perceive with technology. So I agree with those points.
I would just like to say that it is great to hear that you when you say that, I don't care in regards to what how people view me, in my opinion. It's rare, right? Because a fear of judgment and the anxiety surrounding that is very, very common. And so I applaud you for that. And then I also just wanted, like, the one of a very now needed expressed in regards to workplaces, they figure out what in regards to mental health and social media and the distractions involved in that. And what they really appreciate is understanding and the education about the physiological impact like on our brain in regards to social media. So not so much in regards to maybe the YouTubing, but social media across the board, all the different platforms, right? And how that really does impact brain development, especially into our younger population, is huge. So just knowing that, so it's an informed decision that they have in regards to how much time they want to spend
I agree.
on
Like they
social
shouldn't be
media.
constantly be
FOMO
on
is
it, but it should
huge.
be at a moderate level. I think that one, Dr.
Yeah.
Monty Ghosh should answer that question.
Go ahead. Can you rate Dr. Ghosh? I don't know. He might be a bit tied up there. Yeah. What was that?
Sorry, I'm
Hunyah?
here, and I
That was
missed
good.
that. Sorry, I was.
So we got about maybe 10 more minutes in our conversation. I'd love to loop you back in. It looks like Anya had a question for you there. She wanted you to comment on something. So what was that, Anya?
Yes, that we were talking about social media and addictions. I think that Angelique mentioned, like, how do you see it, like, for a younger person who, that what is the right amount of time that they should spend on social media for, like, kids? What would you say?
Oh.
No, I wish I knew that answer, but I mean, I guess it's individual for depending on the person, right? And their resiliency and their ability to cope, and there's social supports available. For myself, for instance, I can't do Twitter. I don't think I have the mental capacity for it, or the time for it in general. But yeah, I think it's very independent. And I think the most important thing, though, however, is to be cognizant of who you are and what your capacity is, and how you feel when you're on social media. And to be constantly keeping yourself in check, and I think that's key. And knowing when to pull back and when to push forward. As long as you have that self-awareness, I think you can navigate the waters of social media better.
So I want to add that the pediatric, what is the National Pediatric Association they do have a guideline of how much technology and social media you should do at certain age. For example, children under, I forgot what age, maybe under 6. I mean, not more than like an hour or 2 a day or a week, but I don't think nowadays anyone follows that, right? So I think that in moving forward, we need to really help our youngsters develop efficacy and a self monitoring kind of skills, self-regulating, just self-regulating learning. That's the proper word for it. That you have to learn how to regulate your own technology access when you're isolated. So that's really hard to develop, right? Like even adults, like I was supposed to be working, and then all of a sudden my Facebook was open. And then half an hour was passed. So it is really hard. I think self-regulation is really key too. And again, back to self-care, right? That's when you need to know when you need to unplug.
Oh, great words of wisdom there. As we're beginning to wrap up our conversation with Moksha Canada Foundation Diversity Festival panel discussion, and we're talking about mental health, really awareness, and our youth perspectives. So we've had amazing panelists today, and I wondered if we can go around. We've had Dr. Lee give some words of wisdom there, and self-regulation is very key moving forward. And I do agree with that, absolutely, from the education field, but just, from what I've witnessed in life in the mental health field, it's very, very key. And allowing us and enabling each other is so very important. So I would love to just hear words of wisdom from the rest of our panelists as we wrap up our conversation on suggestions for our young people moving forward, and how to embrace and perhaps eliminate the taboo of discussing their own mental health and self-regulation. Yeah. So maybe Angelique, I'll get you to jump in, and we're just wrapping up today. Final comment for our listeners or viewers.
So I'm just going to go to what I like to just say. It's just my business slogan, and I say self-care is the best care. Really and truly, self-care is the best care. It's not selfish. And there's a variety of ways that you can do it, and just be mindful of the different options, and be very courageous, right? It's not easy to do, but once you take those steps, it becomes easier, right? And for our adults in the young people's lives, is please try to lead by example. They're watching, and you're in a great position to really influence their self-care practices as they grow on their journey.
You said they're watching, it's true. It starts very, very young, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Wow. Hunyah, did you want to jump in with some words of wisdom?
I would say like keep everything at a moderate level, and make sure that like when it comes to technology, that should be at a moderate level. At the same time, it's like when it comes to mental health, be sure to talk to someone at home first. And if you really need to go out, then I think it's the best time to go and get a professional opinion, in my case. But it all starts at home. That's my opinion.
Yeah, creating a space, yeah, to do that. Thank you. Do we still have Jessenia? I'm not seeing Jessenia. Are you there? I'm not seeing her here. That's okay. Nope, she's not dialed in there. So if you don't mind, I'll jump over to Dr. Ghosh, and then we'll get a moment to wrap up our conversation today. Do we still have Dr. Ghosh?
Yeah, I'm still here. I really like what Angelique just said, like self-care is key, and being aware of your surroundings and being aware of your loved ones, and being there to provide them support as well, just having a supportive community as a whole, and having greater understanding of what substance use disorder is.
That's awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Jessenia, it looks like you're dialed back in. I see you here. And I'd love to get your final comments. No. Alrighty, folks. Well, I just really want to thank all of our panelists today, and thank you to Moksha Canada for allowing this conversation to happen, and unraveling the conversation about mental health and eliminating the taboos, if you will. We are all about connecting, creating a platform for all of us to engage. We welcome your opinions. Please follow us on social media. We look forward to hearing from you. We do have a diversity festival coming up on the 28th and 29th. So check out our performers. They're from coast to coast. We have some great hosts that are hosting from Niagara Falls. We had a chance to host in Guelph and Elora in Ontario. Please join us, some amazing talent, diverse talent. And that's what we're about, celebrating life, celebrating communities, and celebrating you. So thank you to Moksha Canada Foundation and all of our panelists today. My name is Lynn McEntee. I'm your moderator. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.